Hello and welcome to WEBN's special presentation, First in the Nation, the 2020 Iowa Caucuses. I'm Lauren Granada.
And I'm Alex Haskell. Due to delays in the reporting of the Iowa caucus results, there is unfortunately no winner at this time.
Our reporter Samantha Wolf is here to give us live updates on the most recent results released by the Iowa Democratic Party. Sam?
Thank you, Lauren and Alex. Now, we expected to have some more definite answers for you by now, but we're only now just seeing 62% of the final Iowa caucus results. They're showing Pete Buttigieg in a slight lead with 26.9% of the vote over Bernie Sanders, who has 25.1%. Elizabeth Warren is in third with 18.3% of the vote, and Joe Biden is trailing behind in fourth place with 15.6%. This isn't the outcome his campaign was expecting for the night, that's for sure. Now, we may see some changes as these are only partial results, so we'll keep you updated as time goes on. Samantha Wolf, back to you.
Thank you, Sam. We'll keep you updated with more results as they come out, but for now, the WEBN crew has more stories to share from the campaign trail in Iowa this week.
Iowa has historically been the first major contest of the presidential primary season. WEBN's Kayla LaRosa has more on how the caucus works and what makes it so significant.
When you think of Election Day, this is probably the last thing that comes to mind. But the Iowa caucus is anything but typical.
Well, starting in 1972, there was a whole bunch of caucuses that were happening prior to the New Hampshire primary. Now, New Hampshire, based on their state law of 1975, they get to be the first primary in the nation, but a caucus is different in that in order to caucus, you have to show up, let's say, on Monday night at 6 o'clock. In order to vote in a primary, you can vote all day on Tuesday. There's early voting, there's absentee voting. Caucus, you don't have that. There's an actual time and location that you have to be at in order for you to have an input.
A caucus is like a neighborhood meeting, usually held in libraries, churches, and schools. Once Iowans arrive to their caucus location, undecided voters can listen to testimony from representatives of a candidate, or sometimes even the candidate themselves.
For you and your family that wants to actually make this future, this 21st century economy, something that you and your kids can be excited about, please caucus for me and my campaign tonight. But whatever you decide tonight, let's make democracy work again in America and make your voice heard.
After making their first choice by standing with a candidate's group, the group is then counted. If that candidate receives support from over 15% of caucusers in the room, they are considered viable. Those standing with candidates who are not viable must make a second choice.
You also have to publicly show your support for a candidate. There's no private ballot in a Democratic caucus. You have to stand up and say, I support this candidate, and let your neighbors, your husband, your wife see that support publicly. And to me, that's a very interesting aspect of the caucus system.
Now, 5 of the last 7 candidates to win the Iowa caucus went on to win the Democratic nomination, but only one made it to the White House. For WEBN News, I'm Kayla LaRosa.
When candidates talk about the role of the farmer in American life, the message really hits home here in Iowa, where over 85% of the state's land is used for agriculture.
I caught up with Lacona farmer Matt Russell, who thinks that the best way to help the farming industry in the face of issues like climate change goes beyond party lines.
This isn't about big farmers versus small farmers. This isn't about Democratic farmers versus Republican farmers.
Matt Russell and his husband are co-owners of Coyote Run Farm in Lacona, Iowa, where their mission is to deliver top quality beef and produce, utilizing nature to do so.
Essentially using all that fossil fuels to do all that work. We're just having the cows do the work themselves.
Matt's referring to a system called rotational grazing.
We're using our pastures, the sun, the cows, their natural instincts to move them through our farm in a way that the manure ends up being where it needs to be, that they harvest the grasses themselves and then move to another location, and then that land recovers.
And if you're worried about the taste of the livestock,
our carbon negative cows, those steaks should not only be doing better for the environment, they can taste better too.
Matt says there's nothing to worry about. But the concept of working with nature on the farm is one Matt envisions for not only his own.
All the science is saying the fossil fuel era is kind of coming to an end. It's not if it's coming to an end, it's when and how fast.
Matt is at the front line of farmers who are advocating to be leaders of change.
we had the caucus cycle coming up. We knew that the whole world would be here, the candidates, there'd be an opportunity to have this discussion.
Matt has personally sat down with Democratic candidates to discuss the future of agriculture, and he has his own way of teaming up with other farmers.
When I see what the world needs, I just feel this deep sense that God is working every day in my life, in my family, on my farm, calling me to be part of the solutions that are needed.
Matt also serves as the executive director of Iowa Interfaith Power and Light, a group of farmers with faith.
We work with people of faith across the whole spectrum, and we're helping them identify solutions to the climate crisis.
But in order to carry out those solutions, Matt says it will take more than just support from other farmers.
These are the things that we know we can do, but the economics right now don't incentivize that. It's actually just the opposite.
Matt hopes climate change is on the agenda for both political parties. Reporting in Lacona, Iowa for WEBN News, I'm Lauren Granada.
Iowa is home to over 3 million Americans, but according to the U.S. Census, the state is 90% white. Over the years, many have argued that a white state should not hold so much influence over the primary season by voting first.
WEBN's Isha Marate spoke with Iowans about how the state's lack of diversity reflects a shrinking candidate pool.
Actually, today, they get to have a Muslim and African born in Congress.
Diversity is a word that's been used a lot since the beginning of the election cycle. But there's only one candidate of color left in the race to the primaries. We asked voters how they felt about a mostly white candidate pool.
They can't beat Donald Trump and they can't beat a Republican because we're too divided. They're just not going to vote for a woman, they're not going to vote for Asian, and they're not going to vote for anybody gay. I just keep it 100. Right now, it got to be white on white. Donald Trump, Joe Biden.
In a state that is 90% white, does a candidate of color have a fair chance?
My brother, Julian, was a candidate that he really spoke up during the campaign about making sure that Iowa and New Hampshire don't always go first in the nominating process, and that it's good to have a diverse range of candidates. And we certainly had that in many parts of this campaign in this race.
For Andrew Yang supporter Chantiel Simon, diversity means empathy.
About all of us, and all of us empathizing with whatever problems women have, whatever problems Latino have, whatever problems African Americans have. We all come from different communities with different sets of problems, but if we can just sit and we can listen to each other.
This is Isha Marate reporting for WEBN Boston.
The Iowa Caucuses attracts campaign volunteers from all over the country.
I spoke with volunteers who made these Iowa campaigns possible, including one man who came all the way from our home region of New England. After months of campaigning,
here's the deal. We have got to defeat Trump.
Democratic presidential candidates will face their first true test as Iowa voters have their say in their state caucuses tonight.
And therefore the country.
Caucuses really set the tone for the rest of the election.
Falmouth native Alex Urquhart left the Pine Tree State for Iowa in January to volunteer for presidential candidate former Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
I've always been interested in politics. I've always followed along sort of passively, but I've never previously done anything more than really make a few phone calls.
Are you going to caucus on Monday night?
Those phone calls turned into an invitation to work on the presidential candidate's campaign as a volunteer organizer.
Well, I think it's fantastic.
Fort Dodge, Iowa Mayor Matt Bemrich says over the years he's seen volunteers come to Iowa from across the country.
And I really think it shows the power of the process when people feel that empowered that they got to get in a car and they got to drive across the country and be part of this.
Exactly what Urquhart has done. Although there is no place quite like Maine, he says there is something all too familiar it shares with Iowa.
We had a blizzard the other weekend and we were just out shoveling the sidewalk, putting down salt so people didn't slip on ice.
Regardless of the state's similarities,
this has been a great experience. Although I look forward to getting back to Maine.
All across Iowa, volunteers like Alex are busy supporting presidential candidates. Senator Elizabeth Warren and her team of volunteers are busy rallying support on the last weekend of campaigning as the caucuses are set to begin in just more than an hour or so. In Iowa City, Iowa, Alex Haskell, WEBN News. Coming up, we'll give you a look at the candidates on the campaign trail.
And later, a look into the Monday night mayhem in what some are saying could be the last ever Iowa caucus. Welcome back to WEBN Presents First in the Nation, the 2020 Iowa Caucuses.
The days leading up to the caucus are the last chance for candidates to hit the campaign trail in the Hawkeye state, including Senator Bernie Sanders.
Our reporter Brian Daniff followed Sanders on his journey throughout Iowa to answer one question. Can a socialist win the Democratic nomination?
Senator Bernie Sanders describes himself as a Democratic socialist, and that term is often used to attack and criticize the 78-year-old senator from Vermont. However, his supporters view Democratic socialism as one of the main reasons they support him.
Not me, us! Not me, us! Not me, us!
You know, it's not really that controversial of a platform. Everyone needs health care, everyone loves education, everyone wants to get out of the wars. It's not really that radical.
For high school student Trey Hill, it's not the term Democratic Socialism that's appealing, it's what it represents.
Those labels, you know, like that, Democratic Socialism, they don't matter as much when so much is on the line, you know.
So much is on the line, especially for Amy Fisher. She's disabled and lost 2 houses as she waited to be approved to receive Social Security and Medicare.
The American people understand that health care is a human right, not a privilege.
Senator Sanders pledged to protect and expand those programs, made caucusing for him an easy choice.
The freedom that Medicare has given me to be able to go to the doctor when I'm on the floor, you know, crying and sick, and not afraid to go in is everything. And every single American should be able to do that.
The Democratic Socialists of America define democratic socialism as using the economy and society to meet public needs and not to make profits for a few. For Fisher, Senator Sanders is the only candidate who will do exactly that.
Caring about fighting for somebody you don't know is everything to me.
Now, while it's unclear if Senator Sanders will be able to win the Democratic nomination or the general election, it's obvious that his movement of democratic socialism will extend past November. Reporting in Iowa, Brian Daniff, WEBN News.
Last month, the New York Times endorsed 2 women for the Democratic nomination, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar.
The Times endorsement reignited a growing conversation about whether or not a female candidate is electable. Our reporter Isha Murate caught up with the Warren and Klobuchar campaigns to find out what they think.
It's amazing what one persistent woman on the inside and millions of people on the outside pushing can get done. Let's do this. Thank you.
One of the biggest questions of the 2020 election has been, can a woman win? For supporters of Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, the answer is yes.
She's always been my girl since 2007. I wanted her to run against Hillary and against Obama, but she didn't listen to me. I love everything about her. Everything she feels strongly about, it's like she's reading my mind. She's the Energizer Bunny. I just love her.
6 women started out in the race for the Democratic nomination. 2 are left in the Iowa caucuses.
The problem there is women. Who elected this guy? It's in now. White women.
And he's not the only person who thinks so.
I actually learned today that there's more men who support Amy than women. And I think it's our own internalized, like, oh, we're not good enough. And no one's going to take us seriously. That's keeping the women from supporting her more. We're our own worst enemies.
Experts say far fewer women run for elected office. But when they do, they win just as big as the men do.
This is Isha Murate reporting for WEBN in Des Moines, Iowa.
While this caucus was the first for many presidential hopefuls, there is one candidate who is no stranger to this campaign trail.
I followed former Vice President Joe Biden across the state to see if his experience in the White House was enough to connect with Iowa voters.
That he is probably the only one who's capable of reversing 4 years of Donald Trump.
That's what Mahima Viramasi and hundreds of others who filled up this Des Moines Middle School gym are hoping for.
That foreign leaders saying out loud what is happening to the United States of America. Folks, as my dad would say, our children are listening.
Joe Biden is projected to be among the top candidates to win the caucuses. But in order for him to win, it will take more than just his past vice presidency to sway voters.
And he never feels like a politician. He always just feels like a human being who hears what I have to say.
And many of his supporters believe this is possible.
President, you understand that Wall Street bankers and CEOs did not build America. Hard-working Americans, toiling every day, the middle class, they built America.
For some, issues surrounding health is a driving force to support the former vice president.
What was really important for me is mental health, and the fact that one of his most ambitious goals for me is achieving mental health care is so important.
Is he a good man that fights for everyone's rights?
Fights for animal rights, but don't need Donald Trump.
And how about fighting for our public health system?
And fight for our public services, for our services.
And the former vice president is polling in the top 3 the day before the Iowa caucuses. In Des Moines for WEBN News, I'm Lauren Granada.
South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg came into the Iowa race with some Midwest momentum.
I asked Buttigieg supporters what having a candidate from the Midwest in the race means to them. Presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg energized supporters in Des Moines the day before Iowans were set to caucus.
I've always been really attracted to his demeanor, how he presents himself, how articulate he is.
Laureen Shanamonaco traveled all the way from North Carolina. She says it's time for change, and Buttigieg is the one to make that happen.
He's all about promoting unity and strengthening the American people, mending the division in our nation that we've been experiencing over the past couple of years.
Anthony Vizzoli is from South Bend, Indiana, where Buttigieg used to be mayor. He likes Buttigieg's stance on health care.
And so to be able to have health care for everybody, that's the most important thing. If you have a program that you like, keep that, but if you need to get Medicare, that should be made available to you.
Buttigieg spoke on that and a number of other issues like the economy and climate change.
We're going to be dealing with climate change that has leapt off the pages of the science journals and is now threatening cities right here in the middle of the country with once-in-a-century floods happening on an almost annual basis.
Other candidates have stopped or are planning to make more stops ahead of the caucuses. In Des Moines, Iowa, I'm Alex Haskell.
While newcomers like Pete Buttigieg could be considered outsider candidates, there is no other outsider quite like Andrew Yang.
Our reporter Samantha Wolf caught up with the Yang gang to see why they love the idea of a business entrepreneur taking on the presidency.
So what I'm getting is he's going to shock the world.
He's talking about Democratic candidate Andrew Yang, who started the race in obscurity, but now faces a packed room at a rally in Des Moines, Iowa.
We're going to move this country not left, not right, but forward, and that's where we need to go, and that's where you're going to take us.
Now hardcore supporters for a Democratic candidate, it may come as a surprise that many people in the Yang gang at this rally, along with Emilio Medina, voted for Donald Trump in the last election.
I voted for Donald Trump because I was looking for a political outsider. He ran on things like coming in and emptying the political swamp.
The Yang gang is hoping that he will answer their call for a president who isn't a career politician. Fringe candidates like Andrew Yang may not be polling as high as frontrunners in the race. According to a recent Emerson College poll, Yang has about 5% of the support here in Iowa. But the self-proclaimed Yang gang is still so enthusiastic and devoted to this unique candidate. They'd also strongly disagree with labeling Yang as a fringe candidate.
Why is he a fringe candidate? Because he has real solutions that is honest?
Andrew Yang doesn't fit the typical presidential candidate mold. And that's exactly why the Yang gang loves him.
He's the truth, he's a breath of fresh air, and he's exactly what this country needs. Yang doesn't focus so much on left and right. It's very much forward.
Everybody could attest to the authenticity of Andrew Yang as a person.
Yang is predicted to come in 6th place at this year's Iowa caucus, but regardless of what the polls say, these supporters will keep pushing for their top pick. In Iowa, this is Samantha Wolf.
Coming up, we'll take you to the inside of the camps on caucus night.
And we'll tell you more about why the caucus results were put on hold. Stay tuned. Welcome back to WEBN's special presentation, First in the Nation, the 2020 Iowa Caucuses.
Now, the Iowa caucuses results were reported a little differently this year.
For the first time in Iowa caucus history, the Iowa Democrats decided to collect caucus results using a smartphone app.
At around 9 p.m. Monday night, the caucus results were delayed due to precinct leaders reportedly being unable to open the application and properly input results.
At the Sanders campaign rally, Senator Sanders addressed a crowd of tired supporters who were patiently waiting for results.
I imagine, have a strong feeling that at some point the results will be announced. And when those results are announced, I have a good feeling we're going to be doing very, very well here. And the message that Iowa has sent to the nation, the message shared by the American people, is that we want a government that represents all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors and the 1%.
Throughout the night, the Sanders campaign recorded their own data internally, fearing issues with the app. While we now know the Democratic Party initially declined to comment on who created the app due to security concerns, we now know it was developed by a company called Shadow.
Now, Shadow is a Democratic tech firm that the Democratic Party reportedly contracted to create the app. Shadow also has done work for several presidential campaigns, including for former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg addressed the crowd at his Drake University rally, claiming that his campaign was going on to New Hampshire victorious, prompting confusion due to a lack of officially unreported results.
One night! And just tonight, an improbable hope became an undeniable reality.
Campaign took a slightly different approach to the news, talking mainly about looking ahead to the future and thanking volunteers for their support.
We don't know all the results tonight, but tonight has already showed that Americans have a deep hunger for big structural change to make our economy and our democracy work for everyone. Tonight showed that our path to victory is to fight hard for the changes Americans are demanding, changes that Democrats, Independents, and Republicans are demanding. Tonight showed that our agenda isn't just a progressive agenda, it isn't just a Democratic agenda, it's an American agenda.
One of the biggest surprises of the early results was Joe Biden, who is currently projected to come in 4th place. Biden thanked the crowd at his rally before moving on to New Hampshire.
And indications are, from our indications, it's going to be close. We're going to walk out of here with our share of delegates. We don't know exactly what it is yet, but we feel good about where we are. And look, so it's on to New Hampshire.
We now go to Brian Daniff with more results and a look at what could possibly be in store for these campaigns as they leave Iowa behind. Brian?
Thanks, Lauren and Alex. Yeah, we are still trying to process everything that happened last night, and we already have a couple very different reactions from two of the candidates. Mayor Pete Buttigieg claimed a victory last night with no real concrete numbers available to the public. He claimed that was because of his own campaign's internal data. This morning, walking back those comments, saying instead it was a victory for his campaign, that they exceeded expectations, and that they did very well. Obviously, he is leading right now, so we'll see if that holds. As for former Vice President Joe Biden, he is disputing the numbers. He is upset with the process and is really not trusting the word of the Iowa Democratic Party. So we'll see what goes on there in the future. Obviously, right now, he is in 4th place at 15%, which would be a very underwhelming and disappointing finish for the Biden campaign in Iowa. As for the rest of the results, the remaining 38% that we still don't know, there's no timetable. We don't know if we'll know tonight, tomorrow, the next day. And of course, the New Hampshire primary is coming right up. All the candidates have moved on. They have left Iowa. They are in New Hampshire campaigning hard in that state. Obviously, Bernie Sanders heavily favored there, being from Vermont. And as for Nevada, which was talked about to be using the same app that Iowa used last night, the Democratic Party chairman there, William McCurdy, said they will not be using the same app. They may use a different app. They may use some other process, perhaps the same way they've caucused in previous years. But that app that was used last night will not be used again in this primary. And again, at the end of the day, it just leaves Americans once again questioning election integrity as we start the primary and obviously the general election coming up in November. So we'll see what happens from here. That's all I have. Brian Danoff, back to you.
Thank you for watching this WEBN special presentation, First in the Nation, the 2020 Iowa Caucuses.
Be sure to follow us on Twitter at WEBN Boston and check our website at WEBN.TV for more updates on the primary season. In Des Moines, I'm Lauren Granada.
And I'm Alex Haskell. Have a good night.